In the early 1900s, James Pila did something virtually unheard of in turn-of-the-century Tower, Minnesota. The Italian Catholic married a Swedish Lutheran woman named Jenny Anderson. Her brothers owned a gas station and a Vermilion Range bus line. In 1925, they sold the bus line to the company that would become Greyhound and the gas station to James. The Pilas would go on to also run the Glenmore Resort and the Y Store and become known as the Gold Finds of the North. Dick Pila recently gave a standing room only presentation on his family history, and friends and family came from as far away as Arizona.
The family lore said that the transportation service had been purchased by Greyhound, and I wanted to hear, was that just family lore, or did that actually happen?
Similar talks to Pilas have been happening for the last 3 years. They're called History Talks on Main Street, and they're put on by the Tower-Soudan Historical Society. Previous talks have covered topics from the long-abandoned Pike River Power Dam to the Martilla drugstore that ran for more than 80 years. The final talk of the 2023 season will come in September when a range historian from Hibbing focuses on the founder of the Vermilion Iron Range, Civil War veteran Charlemagne Tower.
And it's going to be Charlemagne's Tower's tracks to the future. They're talking about the development of the iron ore mining industry on the Vermilion Range.
Recently, the Tower-Soudan Historical Society has started something called Train Tales in the Society's century-old train car 81.
Because we want to get children involved. We want them to start asking questions early on, like we never did.
That was one of the conclusions of Dick Pila's speech. Ask about family history now before it's too late. Holding on to history in Tower, Dave Anderson, Northern News Now.
And the history talk about Charlemagne Tower will be held Thursday, September 14th, if you want to check it out. And by the way, Tower City, North Dakota is also named for it.